All right, we're live. Thanks everyone for hanging tight there. Live with Konrad from Elevate OS. Konrad and I met back at Blueprint. First couple of times, we had a really good chat on just kind of different tactics that we're using to get out to people and outreach, and introduced me to the world of virtual assistants, which has been a life changer. I've become a prophet for people. I can't believe I didn't start that sooner. So thank you for that out of the gates. For everyone here, Konrad's a founder and CEO at Elevate OS. Elevate OS is changing resident experiences. So we're both in the resident experience side of things. So it's always fun to chat about that. The getting to hell yes. So for a reminder for everybody, we talk about the buying journey and how we connect with people and basically how we're growing our business. And the big part of what's different about getting to hell yes is talking about the different way that people are buying these days. How do you reach these prospects? What are we doing to reach out to them? And really specifically figuring out what type of buyer is a hell yes buyer and what's going on in their life, and kind of digging a little bit about that. So kick it off like we always do. Konrad, give us a little bit about your background. How'd you end up in this role? And then we'll kick off with who's your ideally hell yes buyer. Tell us a little about Elevate OS, the problem you solve. Oh, you're muted. You're muted all of a sudden. Muted now, still. Something just changed. I'll remove you from the stage and bring you back. Hang on. This is live, everyone. I hear something now. No, now you're muted.
What about now?
You're good. All right.
What just happened? Didn't we just do a test run? I didn't change any. I didn't touch anything. I didn't change anything.
Go figure. Well, that's technology for you. Okay, so kick it back off again. Background, how'd you get into this role? What's the problem you guys solve?
Yes. So my name is Konrad. I'm the CEO and founder of Elevate OS. Our platform, what we do for owners is we consolidate their technology stack. So a good example of that would be, if you look at 10 different buildings, they all have 10 different. They might have 10 different hardware, lock systems, access control thermostats. They might be using different systems for managing reviews, loyalty programs, payments. So we come in, we are like a resident app, essentially, that really consolidates everything into one place for residents, but also for staff. So you're not having to juggle different point solutions for various different goals, right? So that's high level. How I got started into it, honestly, by accident. I don't think I woke up and wanted to do multifamily real estate. And turns out that there's a lot of people like me that ended up in the space by accident. I originally wanted to be more in the wellness space, where I was going to open up like these anti-aging wellness clinics, right? That was my kind of goal. And I actually went to school, and I have my doctorate degree in physical therapy, Northwestern, because that was kind of more, again, that was the goal. That was where I was headed back in the day. And I ended up getting into multifamily, really by accident. I started a company during grad school to make some extra money, and the company blew up, took off more than I expected. And that was my kind of first business in multifamily. And then Elevate OS is like my second baby in the space. Once I learned about all the problems that managers and residents are dealing with, right, with these multitude of apps, right? So first business I had it for about 4 years, so 2014 to 2018, and then Elevate 2018 up until now. And we're in 41 states, over 300 cities, almost 1,000 buildings. So it's been going pretty well.
Do you guys pitch primarily to operators, to owners?
In the beginning, very beginning, and I have clients that will attest to this. I would I would come to their building with cookies and sweets, and I would be like, hey, like, let me show you what we do. Let me show you how the app works. And I would get clients like that. Nowadays, I would say like the last few years, we've been getting more larger kind of portfolio type deals, and it's usually dealing with corporate teams. So it can be a corporate team on the management side. It can be a corporate team on the developer, so someone who builds buildings, or it could be ownership. It could be asset managers. It really is all of them. It's not just one. Um, I think, we've gotten deals, even like now we get deals from managers, like a property manager that uses us in one building. They switch to a different management company, or they have a new company they're working with, and they'll introduce us to their corporate team. They'll be like, hey, this worked really well in my
Corporate side. A little bit of technical difficulty here. Froze. So what Conrad's talking about, we feel the same thing often. Especially when people move around a ton in an industry, we get it where people use Iris at one specific spot and then move to a different spot and realize, I couldn't live without that. Now that kind of pull is conviction, right, around the solution and how it solves a problem. One of the problems that we kind of dance around with a little bit is that the people that often use our product aren't in a buying position. So when Konrad gets back here, we'll talk a little bit around how that converts from just being an on-site person you're able to speak to, and then get to people who actually have buying authority. One of the things that we find often is that while the field team might be completely convicted around a solution, the challenge is around how do you begin to put that in place so that the management team can buy it, and especially with something that's residence facing. When resident facing issues come up, boom, you're back. When resident facing issues come up, we find that the buying, what I was just talking about, Konrad, is that we often see we get pulled at the field level, but the field level doesn't have buying authority. And so I was talking a little bit around, we feel a little bit of the same path where we get a bit of pull from the field teams, but then they get blocked. It actually is kind of funny. Like we get blocked either at the buying level when there's the corporate side of things, or we get blocked when the corporate wants to do it and the field team doesn't buy in. And so curious, when you're out there bringing suites and stuff to the field level and they're bought in, especially for something that's resident facing, how do you get to the buyers?
Yeah, I mean, so nowadays I think the in general the buying dynamic changed. So like when I started in 2018, I call it like the point solution wars. Like, it's everybody, like it was almost like the corporate teams were not set up to manage all these point solutions. They were like, property managers were signing up for stuff, and then they were putting kind of tickets in to the corporate team to like get it integrated or not integrate, whatever I guess happened. So and
building property managers had buying authority.
Yeah, I mean, like there's, I guess, like in 2017, 2018, I guess it depends on what you do, right? But
yeah,
in 2017, 2018, it depends if your product integrates.
Yeah.
Right. That's maybe a different type of conversation. But if your service, your platform doesn't need to run with an integration to their PMS system, if it could run without it, then the manager was able to decide. Just like the manager can decide like a service contract for like a remodeler or
sure,
someone who does work on site, construction site, right? So
painting, I make ready, right?
Yeah, make ready. So like they can decide that on their own a lot of times. Nowadays, I think what happened like in 2020, 2021, there was an influx of tech. And then in 2021, 2022, around that time, people were like, centralization was the big word. And part of that was, we have all these things we signed up for. we have, if I have one like ownership group that I talked to, they had like 400 Yardi integrations to different vendors, right? And I'm like, that's crazy to me, right?
Yeah.
So they realized like we should not be having all these different things in different regions, because imagine trying to run your business and, you have one sales rep that likes Salesforce, another one who likes HubSpot, another one who likes something else. Like you wouldn't get anything done, and you'd
Right.
end up just paying for different CRMs based on what one of your sales reps likes. And
Yeah, you're paying with time.
that's kind of what happened with property management, to be honest. I mean, like, a lot of the tech decisions, nowadays are going through corporate, which in my opinion, they should, right?
Mhm.
And, I was kind of lucky in a sense. I think, I was in the golden age of point solutions, like back in the day. And, I was able to kind of almost like sneak in, into some of
Mhm.
these properties. And now we're at a point where, we're not, almost like we were small back then, but now we're enterprise grade platform, right? And we are able to go and talk to a corporate team that has a portfolio of tens of thousands of units, and we can make it work. But 5-6 years ago, our app was completely different than it is now. And I doubt I would land an enterprise deal 6 years ago when we first like started with an MVP of our app, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody would.
No. I mean, and even back then, like the way you described it, there wasn't a lot of CIOs out there.
No.
There was no enterprise buyer. It was they're kind of a collection of P&Ls that were run as independent kind of like entities because they need to be ready for M&A. So they're kind of like, by design, the business is set up to be a whole bunch of different little parts that all come together in a Frankenbot, but they don't actually do that. Right.
Yeah.
And now you're saying they want to have a consistent experience because they need brand.
Yeah, I mean, look, the other way to describe it is like, let's just say like, and this is happening less today, I would say. But back in the day, I mean, if you need something, right? You go on Google and you type in, I need a, CRM for X, whatever the
Yeah.
problem you're trying to solve for, right? If you're running, a gym, you're like, I need a gym management software. If you're running a housekeeping service, you need a housekeeping CRM. If you're running sales, you need a HubSpot or a Salesforce. So that's exactly what a lot of these companies do, right? If they're trying to solve for one thing, they'll go on Google and they'll search for that one thing. And that's not always the best approach. I think there's solutions that are specific to multifamily that could be kind of more all encompassing, where you're kind of hitting 3 to 5 things, not just one.
Mhm.
And I think that's where like these corporate teams, they need to work together. There's facilities, there's marketing teams, there's director of operations, right? They all need to talk together to make decisions. Otherwise, it's going to be a Frankenstack,
Mhm.
as I call it.
Yeah. And then do you find like now, so with respect to the kind of like, we'll kind of pull a segue from that. Like you're taking the problem that you solve because you bring together the Frankenstack into a single skin for the resident and for the team. Like that's a problem that needs to be solved. But what's going on in their life that they need to solve that problem? Like you can kind of maybe you can live with one app and then maybe 2 apps, maybe 3 apps, and then all of a sudden you get to 4 apps. You're like, well, I don't know how I got there. You definitely would never get to 10 apps, but then all of a sudden you're like 7 apps, and you're like, how does that all? Well, what point do they realize that the accumulation of Franken bits stops working?
Yeah, I mean, I think
their business.
yeah, I think that you'd be surprised. There are buildings that have more than 10 things.
Yeah, I've heard 41 up to 41 logins. I heard from I think it was somebody else.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but it's not uncommon that a building has 10 things to log into or more. I think what ends up happening is there's like what I would break the things down into like two things. So there's resident facing and there's staff facing.
Right.
So in general, we've historically focused on like resident facing stuff, right?
That's your brand.
Yeah. And we do, we do some staff facing consolidation as well. But in general, the thing that I, focus on the most is the resident experience, right?
Mhm.
You don't want to say, hey, resident, you just moved in and you got to download this app to manage your packages, this app to manage your front intercom to get into the building and let visitors in, and this other app to get into your unit, and then this app for loyalty. It's too much. And what ends up happening is if it's almost like, imagine like a person has, if you have 100% capacity to focus on one thing, and on your app, on your phone, you have 5 or 6, and you're basically kind of forcing somebody to devote, 20% attention to this app, 20% to this other one. So they're never really in one platform. So you end up lowering your engagement and your usage across all the platforms. And then it also causes an issue because you have low engagement, and you're using multiple platforms, you probably don't have the best data from any of these platforms because you're only getting 20, very low engagement. So, I think if I was an owner of a building, like a big, these big multifamilies, like I want to know the data. Like what are residents using? What are they not using? And it's really hard to do that when you have multiple front office resident facing type systems.
Mhm.
And I think that's, the way to know is, to do an audit. Every property should do an audit once a year. I always tell this to all my properties. You should do an audit and figure out what you're paying for. Pull up your, your monthly expense report and go line by line and be like, what is this? Right. You'd be surprised. There's properties that pay for stuff for years and they don't even know what it is. I've looked at the reports with some of them. I'd be like, what is this? I don't know. and I'm like, well, why are you paying it? Oh, we just been paying it for the last 2 years.
We're afraid to not pay for it.
Yeah, we're afraid to not pay for it. And I was like, well, you should know all these things. And that's why I recommend every year you do an audit of all your expenses, your monthly expenses, annual expenses that you're obligated to pay. And then figure out like, do these things do the same thing? Because there's times where I've met a property where they're paying for a software that does the exact same thing. They're like 2 competing products, and they're paying for both. And I'm like, how does that even happen? Right? It makes no sense. So, I think it's easy to find out, to answer your question, if you do an audit, or your residents start complaining. I think that's the only
way. How does it start? Like from a resident experience value proposition, you end up in an audit of all their existing expenses. Like, are you trying to quantify the pain so they actually can look at the data and go, oh my gosh, I actually have 43 things here?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, what do they have, right? That where we could potentially save money, right? A lot of them, like, I'm not saying everybody, but there's a lot of times the managers are not always aware of what these companies can do, right? Like someone at someone at corporate might know, but the management team on site doesn't always know. And corporate is not really involved with the day-to-day books of a single property, right? Yeah. So that's where there's sometimes like I see there's like a disconnect, and it's like, hey, like here's what we can do, and then that goes back up to corporate, and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Like there is 2 things here that we probably don't need, and we can get rid of. There's also a lot of situations where something is connected to like their PMS software, like Yardi, and maybe they're not paying for it, but it's sending emails to residents automatically. So So for example, imagine like you are trying to manage a building and you're the owner of the building and you're like, I'm trying to like promote my own renter's insurance program. And imagine that 3-4 years ago, someone signed up for some renter's insurance company or whatever it is, and that company automatically is emailing all your residents. So all your efforts to try to bring it and offer like your own system are getting basically stifled by this automated integration that nobody knows it's connected except whoever does the integration connections that's in the corporate office. So
And
you as a manager,
and they looked at it 2 years ago when they signed it up for it, and it just runs as long as it doesn't break.
yeah, it doesn't cost anything. So it's almost like it's nobody even knows that it's running unless you actually look at the integrations that are connected to that property. So
Yeah.
it happens. And, we had a situation like that where, like, for example, because we have our own kind of services, right? And we go live at a property and residents can book, like we have this resident app that does all these great things with access control, rent payment, maintenance, but we also have a marketplace. So like residents can book a housekeeper and a handyman and, a pet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we have this marketplace model and, we go live at a property and like, we obviously, the way it's set up is these properties have their own branded app. It's their app.
They have the Yardi app, right? Every PMS is a resident-facing app.
We run the services for them. They get a revenue share. Everybody wins. So imagine like they sign up for some legacy system 2-3 years ago that's still emailing residents to use these services, right? So you're moving into you're moving into the building. You're a new resident, and you get an email that says, "Hey, here's our branded building app. Everything's in one place." And then you get another email from a vendor that was, again, connected 2-3 years ago that people forgot to disconnect, and they're emailing them similar things for services. So now you're basically, if we're doing a revenue share, those residents might be going to this other system because they're confused, which is exactly what happened. People are coming to us and saying, "Hey, we want to use our credits that we got," and we're like, this is not an email from our system. This is some other system. Right. So then we gotta go back to the management team. They got to go to corporate. They got to shut it down. And the management team doesn't even know it's on.
So is the problem? I mean, like, so then like there's a lot of you guys are kicking ass right now. And those are sound like a lot of like small problems. Like, what's the big problem they're trying to solve? Like, is it that all those small problems add up? Is it like, hey, I'm not getting my share of the rev share because people are buying from all these other places? Is it like what is it specifically? Like what am I typing into Google when I'm looking to and I want to get your results?
For us, for Google,
I'm a PM, right? I'm a PM or a regional, and I'm considering something. I'm typing something into Google. What's that search term?
So resident app, resident. Now
I have a. Let's assume I'm on Yardi, right? So I've got a Yardi app, and that's the resident app right now. And so like, there's kind of like, that's already like, there's something there, but why doesn't that work? Is it because of everything else?
No, it's a great question. So I would say, and Yardi is one example. So I'm going to go over like a few examples because this is
around. We're not going to beat up on Yardi.
Right. So Yardi has Rent Cafe. Other large PMS have their own resident portal, I call it.
Yeah.
It's a resident app as well, right? I would say if you look at what ours can do and what theirs can do, I would kind of break it down to like basic resident app for them and ours advanced resident app, right? So the difference is that we have a ton more functionality. It's like a true resident app. And I think a lot of companies, they use the term resident app very loosely. I think a lot of companies have an app, right? An app in the app store that does something. So, recently I was on a call with a client and someone told us that this company has a resident app. And I go, they do, but is it an app or a resident app? Because a resident app means that a resident can do a lot of things through there besides
Gotcha.
access control. So like I actually told the client, I said, that's an access control app. It only unlocks your door and that's it. It's an app that residents have to probably use, but it's not a resident app. A true resident app is something that allows a resident to do at least, 10 different things,
Mhm.
are not just specific to one vertical. It allows them to pay their rent, do maintenance requests,
Yeah.
book amenities, message with the management, pull important documents about the property and FAQs, call the management, email management. Maybe there's we have like a neighborhood perks, which shows you like local businesses in the area that partner with the building. You can chat with your neighbors. You can unlock your door, manage your thermostats through integrations that we have. So to me, that's more of like a true resident app. In Unity's case, theirs does some of the stuff, but it's missing some of the more kind of complex pieces that we
So
handle.
when I see some of those apps, because like we have similar conversations, right? Like, so we've got a maintenance app or a maintenance solution, and it could be a Google form, and it's not unusual, right? And so digging into what that does, because like we feel the same things, that people have a kind of they put a box or a label to what they already have, and part of our job is to displace what that label does as it relates to our solution.
Yep.
Right. Because how you described it, like if I think of like all the apps that are out there, they're a way to engage with my product. So let's use access control because it's generic enough, right? So I've got an access control system. You put in whatever XYZ solution in your building. You're gonna deploy this to everybody in the building, and they've got their app. And their app is to do a specific thing. But what I'm hearing from you is that you guys have designed your application to consider all things that a resident does. So it's like, rather than starting for what you need to do for one function, you started with what the resident needs to do in 365 days, right? Pull the docs, pay my rent, all those things.
Yeah, things they do daily. Not, and look, some people are going to argue. Like, I remember there was one big company, they went public. It's an access control company. I'm not going to say names, but their game, their go-to-market was, this is like back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Was because we're an access control app, everybody has to use us, and that's going to give us engagement. That was like their go-to-market. Like, because we have a resident app that has this access and everybody needs to unlock their door, that guarantees us app engagement. To me, when I hear that, I'm like, that's not app engagement. That's someone needs to unlock their door and they're going to open up your app for 10 seconds and then you're never going to open it up again until the next time they need to open a door.
But they're smart enough, they actually have a Siri shortcut and they don't even have to do that.
Exactly. So for me, an app engagement means, they are bored on their couch. They're sitting and watching TV at home. And they're like, I want to go, there's a post that just got posted by a neighbor over here. Someone's selling some lamps. Let's look at that. And I know it sounds stupid, but like, that's just one example of many things that our app does, where someone's like, I need something, or I'm curious about something. Let's go into our resident app and see and learn more about that right? Maybe they're flying, maybe they're on vacation, maybe they're in Europe and they want to come and they're like, you know what? I need to book the guest suite in my building for my family that's coming next month. They can be in a different country and go open up our app and book that guest suite or a conference room, right? Because they have a call or a podcast scheduled, right? And you need quiet space. So all those things are things you can do in our system. So it's not just limited to just access, for example, right?
And do you find that what's going on at I'll kind of talk about today. So who's your principal buyer now? Is it the owner or the operator or the PMCs or the third parties, or?
It's all of them, to be honest.
Okay.
No, it's really is all of them. We have, we're talking with ownership groups, we're talking with PMCs. The nice thing is if you do a great job with the PMC, you'll likely get more. Like they'll they'll talk to you about other owners. Like they want to, if something's working well, right? Like if you're working with ownership group X and PMC is managing their buildings and you're rolled out at 10 of their buildings and that ownership group buys another building, they're probably going to want the same setup in that new building as in all 10. So we do work with both. Sometimes the owners have requirement, like specific things that they need, like custom build outs with like a feature or an on and off button for something that, they run differently. And that's where we come in too. Like, a lot of these big companies, they might not always do that for a 10, 20 unit or 10, 20 building owner. That might be too small for them. For us, we're able to do these tweaks, customizations pretty quickly, right?
So when you sell to your customers, are they looking to like solve like everything comes down to an ROI? So eventually, I mean, it's funny. Like people buy for different reasons and they justify or validate with an ROI, right?
Yep.
So you're thinking about putting things in front of a buyer. How do you what's the after they've decided and they got to go get the funding, how do you help them quantify the ROI savings?
Yeah. So for us, it's super easy. I try to do all that ahead of time. So generally, it's nice to know what they already have set up and how they're using it. And what we do is I'll try to, so I have I call it like immediate ROI and there's like long-term ROI. So immediate ROI is generally cost savings. I think our pricing is really good. And a lot of the owners and property management groups that we work with, they tell us that too. They say you guys have the best pricing. So one, our pricing for our platform is good, but two, these other solutions that they might be paying for, they might not need that are separate. They're able to cut off. So they're able to save money on those systems. So that's number one. So it's almost like day one ROI is cost savings, right?
Yep.
Now, long-term ROI, there's a couple things. So one, we have a revenue share from our B2C marketplace, which is like residents needing things and spending money on things they need, right? So it's always like it's a dual benefit. One, you add a new amenity to your building because you're like, now you can order groceries through our branded community app. You can order a housekeeper and a personal trainer and a dog walker. So these are all things that residents need, but the owners and managers don't want to manage the work of managing these people. So we are the ones, we have that kind of booking system built in that we can onboard vendors. So anytime somebody needs something, they book it through our app, and then we make some money on that, but we also do a revenue share with the owner. So long-term, there's a revenue share, right? So they can make some money. And then two, we are a resident retention company. So at heart, we are an all-in-one, but our goal, it's not to we're not like a maintenance company or an amenity booking company. We're a resident retention company. So we want to make sure we provide the best experience to the residents, and we give the data back to the owners to help them retain those residents, right? Long-term benefits is retention, right? The goal is let's help improve. If you have 40% retention year over year, let's get it to 75 or 80, right? Because that means you're doing less turns, you're paying for less turns, it's costing
you better revenue forecast, your cap rate's stronger, all that stuff.
So that's the long. And I have one client actually that basically uses us for that. Like they buy a building, they'll find buildings that are paying for a lot of extra fluff. And they're also finding buildings that are not engaging the residents. So there's not any like on-site services offered, like amenities where you could rent out, basically buildings that are only doing the bare minimum. And my ownership group that I work with, they buy those buildings and then they'll implement an app like ours. They'll start doing events, social events, and they straight up told me, they're like, that's our business model. That's what we do. And they improve that retention of the residents.
And then how do you
they're actually they're a Canadian company.
Oh, there you go. Congratulations. That's awesome. It's awesome to see a Canadian do something that's innovative. I have a persistent frustration with that.
That's why I know you're Canadian. So that's why I'm like trying to like hype it up here, because this is like a big deal.
Well, you're from Chicago, which is kind of close, right? I mean, it's not formally
across the pond, right?
Across the pond. When you take a look at at that retention argument, and I've got an article I'm kind of drafting with someone out there right now to talk about retention, because like sales and leasing, you can attach to somebody, right? Retention is attached to a team, or it's hard to nail down what happened. So when you to create that retention moment, when you talk about retention, how do you associate the building's retention to your product making the difference?
Yeah, so I agree with you. Like if there's a bad team on site, the retention is probably gonna be terrible,
or it might be good, but you never know, right? It's kind of like, it's hard.
Generally, if there's like a bad maintenance person on site,
then it's
and not, and then managers who don't answer emails. I mean, I'd imagine the retention is going to be pretty terrible.
Yeah.
So our platform, what it does, so one, it consolidates, right? So you're using less things, right? So residents are in one system more. You're able to get better data. I know like what's being used, what's not working. We also have surveys built in. Okay. So I know a lot of PMCs, they use like these external surveys that are triggered off of move-in. And we have a lot of stuff that is not, that Yardi doesn't have information in, within, right? So like our app has a lot of data points that just Yardi does not have, like Yardi or Entrada. And a lot of the data that we have is for things that we have in our platform that they don't, right? So we also have our own surveys. We're able to kind of predict and see real time, like what is like a satisfaction level with the concierge front desk. What's the real time satisfaction with the management team? What's the real time satisfaction with the maintenance team, right? How quick are work orders? I mean, I think Yardi PMSs, they generally have reports on work orders and all that. But I think when you have less opportunities where there could be like drip happening because you're using multiple systems, you get better data. And I think that's where we come in. We are also like helping the on-site teams. We're kind of giving them insights of like, hey, here, like we're like their support team for the social aspect. We have a whole team that like literally all our focus is engagement in the app and the platform and services. So if a building's not engaging, generally we will try to reach out to the manager first and say, hey, like, we noticed your building is underperforming, like versus what we expect a building like to do. And generally we kind of try to plug the hole, right? Whatever that hole is. And if we can't, then we'll get the regional involved and we'll say, hey, we got to figure this out because this building is not, they're underperforming and they should be doing a lot better here in these points. So, a lot of the metrics that we have generally correlate with the retention metric. Like if they're doing bad in the app and other things that we measure within the app and services usage and all that, like generally the building's also underperforming.
Do you find that like your customers, like it sounds like a lot of things that you do with a community is what the community manager would do, right? But do you find that your customers can kind of like go a little bit leaner on the community manager role because they're using 100%. What you guys do?
100%. I actually have a few ownership groups who, because of so we have a model where So we're probably like we're few in our space that do this, but we have this tech platform. So a lot of people from the outside looking in, they're like, oh, you guys are this tech company that provides this platform to the owners and managers. But we're a hybrid company actually, because we have a services department, this kind of residence experience department, and there's two parts that make that up. One is we have like Fit by Elevate, and then we have our events by Elevate. So both of those things are generally services that a property manager would outsource. So if you're in, let's just say you're in Nashville or Miami, and you have a building that has like a gym or like a yoga studio, most properties offer the residents free workout classes. So like if you live in a building, on a tour, they're walking you through a tour and they're saying, hey, Konrad, our building has 5 classes a week that we host that are complimentary to our residents. And they have like a schedule in the gym. And it's great because if you live there, you just take the elevator down, you work out, you meet new people. It's a great way to engage. And the second thing we have is the events. So we have, again, our kind of client engagement managers. They help the property run the event. So what that means is I have a few clients who literally have less people on site, because before they had to hire like a resident experience manager on site, give them a salary. And it's funny how it worked, but like I would tell clients, like, why are you paying for this person? Like, why do you need to pay for them? Well, they got to run the events in the building. And I go, well, what does that person do? Tell me like exactly what they do. Well, they have to go and find vendors, right? And they have to pay those vendors to do events. I go, well, why can't that be outsourced? Like theoretically, a property could have one person at corporate doing this for multiple buildings, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it's not like that person's running the events themselves. No, like nobody's going to be a professional caterer, a DJ, a yoga instructor. There's no person that does all those things, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to outsource. So, not only are you paying for the salary of this person, but you're also paying for the event costs. So what if you just eliminate the salary of the person and get someone like us, where we come in, we have a whole network of different, whatever you need, we will arrange it for you. And it's much more cost. Right?
So it sounds to me like, I'm just kind of like to kind of bring us to close here, right? So I'm a building operator and I've got low performing, the financial metric is I've got a low performing building from a renewal perspective, right? So I've got to do something. I want to improve my resident experience. And maybe I'm having a hard time, or I don't have the budget to hire a community resident experience manager, right? But I want to solve that problem. So how do I, improve my resident experience? How do I improve my community experience? Okay, I'm going to get Elevate OS. And you solve the problems around revenue retention. You're able to prove that with data, which everyone wants to have. You're able to do a cost savings on the effort that it takes, and in some cases, the role of the community manager, or maybe the resident experience manager, because of your services marketplace and because of all the things that you've got, right? Do I have that figured out? Do I have that heard correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like full circle, right? Because because we're helping physically with staffing, we also have all the data going to our app. So like the data, everything we're doing, which it is a full circle.
Right now that leaks out the side door right now. No one really knows what people are doing.
Yeah. They'll, like, a manager will throw like a party and they have no idea how many people showed up, totally. They might have photos from the event, but we do everything in a very organized way. Like my team has like, KPIs that we set that it needs to be done this way, and things that we measure. So like we're not planning events 1 week before. The events are planned months out, so residents can add it to their calendar and show up to the event. We're not doing milk and cookie events either. Like most people, like, would you come down to get milk and cookies at the building? If you're on a diet, you're not going to come down. You're like, it's going to be just milk and cookies this time. So that's where, like, if a property wants to really engage, they need to do it the right way, and you need to have professionals handling. So either A, get someone at corporate who's going to drive that engagement, or B, get a company like ours who has a full suite, and you can just plug us in and we'll get the job done.
Well, and you just said two scary things, right? Get something from corporate, or hire somebody. Those are two things that are kind of like not available to you in 2025. Right? Like the corporate people are going to say no, and the hiring person, they're going to say no because the numbers just aren't there, especially for a building that's underperforming. Like they're trying to squeak out a way to solve a problem. I mean, like everybody is trying to do more with less. So if you want to increase that resident experience, the budget for that you're going to get for your software is going to be multiple times more practical than going to hire. Or what's worse, I mean, a PM, like you're going to have a conversation with a corporate, that's scary, right?
Yeah.
And so like if you again, now we're talking about your PM being your buyer, but you're saying like, but that's the one that gets affected, right? And so like if there's an asset manager or a regional that's looking to solve a collection of properties, a problem in a collection of properties or in a certain regional area, they're going to talk to, you're going to be searching, hey, we've got a persistent retention issue. I want to improve my resident experience. That's a way to get retention going. This is why people are leaving. We're going to call Elevate OS and then you guys are going to come in and do your thing. So I'm curious. So when the things that you described, the resident experiences you described, this again, talking about the getting to hell yes, it sounds more on the higher end side of things in terms of multifamily, like versus affordable and lower end, C's and B's. Like when you're taking, and this again, specifically around the hell yes side of things, if you could line up 100 meetings, but you can only take 10, which 10 are you taking?
Yeah. So historically, we had no sales team up until like 120,000 units.
Yeah.
So what I did was on our website, I literally put software and services for Class A apartments. This was like 2018, 2019.
You closed the gap, right?
I only wanted Class A apartments because number one, they're going to do really well in the marketplace and the revenue share for the owner. So like a lot of times, like I don't want to overpromise, underdeliver. So if I know I'm going to get like the best building, the owner's going to make money. So like they'll pay me for the software, but I know they're going to make extra money beyond what they're paying me. And that's a win. The owner is going to be like, oh, this is working so well. I want this in my other buildings. So that's what I did for the first few years. The last 3 years, let's call it, I wanted to kind of change the bell curve, right? If the bell curve is like this and we're at like the tippy end of it, the 1% of these Class A buildings, I was like, well, I want to open up our platform to other like B and C assets. So we built a lot of features to support that. So if someone wanted to use our platform to help with retention in those B and C assets, you could. Are you going to get as much revenue share from the marketplace? Probably not as much, right? But if you want to have an app where it's like a super app, like that's your control that, because those B and C assets might have smart locks,
right?
They might have an intercom to let visitors in. So that's where our app, I think, benefits somebody who has kind of B and C assets. Back in the day, like again, 2018, I didn't have some of those features. So I wanted to stick to what I know I can do. But now we do have the capability to work with kind of all types. And it just depends on what the owner's goals are. Right.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I imagine like and I'm not being like prickly here, but like the things that you described, if I was an A or a luxury, like that sounds, and it's even how you guys brand it, right? The hotel experience, that sounds super important to me if I'm competing on service versus competing on price. Like if I compete on price, I'm going to give you I'm going to work you hard on price because I already have an app. Like I've got an app through my PMS that I'm paying for. And so and that's included. So I'm going to either like not pay for that app, which is going to be marginal, and then pay for yours as incremental. So I'm just trying to, think through like you're out there in the market and you're positioning, and you're throwing a party for people. Like it's going to be a party to remember, not going to be something that is just kind of like a lunch and learn. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And look, there are properties, like, let's just say like affordable, like if the owner tells me like my goal is so residents cannot talk to each other.
Yeah.
My goal is just so they could pay rent every month and do maintenance requests. I'm going to tell them our platform is not for you.
Yeah.
Right.
That's powerful, right? That feels good to
But
say that.
if they tell me this, if they say, Conrad, we need to, we need those two or three things that I just mentioned, but we need to also connect our locks so our residents don't have to go through another platform.
Yeah.
Then I will change. I will say, then you would benefit from our system because they might have 10 different buildings that are affordable, and all 10 might have different hardware. And that's where we come in and unify the experience. So it depends. That's the answer. Like if someone just says pay rent and maintenance, stick to your PMS that you're using.
But you're going to get, you're going to get full price on someone who's trying to solve that suite of problems.
Yep.
And you're going to be pushed in a discounting position when you're solving one or two problems.
Right.
And so that's kind of like, I mean, for the audience to listen, it's kind of like permission to say no, like how you just said it, right? Like it's so empowering as in a person in a sales role to recognize you've got permission to say this isn't a good fit.
Yeah.
Because they're not trying to solve the problems that you're trying to solve, right? And so I think that like for everyone listening, like I think it's something very powerful that where you compete. Like Conrad knows where you compete and where you can win and you can get full price. And where you're going to be discounting because you're competing against things that they may not value the service marketplace. They may not value the community building that you guys do, right? And so if they don't value that, they're not going to pay for it. They want you to solve they want so that you're talking about like the market that's going to pay you the most. Is going to be this category of people that value those services that you solve the most.
100%.
And so like that's something that like often everyone gets caught in a trap. Now we've got a few more minutes here. And everyone for listening, like we'll wrap it up real quick. But like the idea of I need to solve a problem about resident retention is especially valuable the higher you're charging for rent.
Yeah.
Because your per unit cost of having an empty unit is exceptionally painful. Even if it's a big building, like if you're charging $4,000 a month for rent, that's a number that is worth keeping a resident in there, right? And so the ROIs get better. They start arcing upwards and to the right faster because the cost of vacancy is even higher. And then, the one thing I heard through the calls, like, one thing we always ask is like, does your buyer have a time wall? Like, do they have to solve something by a certain time? Well, like the number of, let's say A or maybe high B, A luxury renters that are out there is limited. And they maybe don't move as much as people in the C's and D's. And so like what I'm hearing from you is that, okay, I do really well in this space. I get full price in this space. I sell to owners and operators because they distribute how awesome we are to everybody else that cares about that stuff. And then you get into, the ROI around, I save you rent, I save you retention, which has expenses everywhere. Like that's like it's the damage, what do you call it? The blast radius of a resident that churns is crazy.
Terrible.
Right? It's terrible. Like whatever you can actually. And I think that what's interesting about this business is that for the last 6-7 years, it feels like it's been an acquisition type business. But now, and for sure, the next cycle, this is a retention. It's a recurring revenue model. It's a recurring revenue business in multifamily right now. And if you don't think of it in terms of revenue recognition, a recurring revenue model, you've misplaced your understanding of how the business works and how businesses and how properties are valued. And so, like all the things that you're talking about, you've gone through this curve up 2018, and then the 2020 this is nonsense, and then now we're into this curve that especially values what you deliver, because they may have been able to replace those rents real quick in 2020, 21, but now it's like strategic. And so what you do is especially valuable for a certain audience, and they're willing to pay full rate because the fact they don't have that unit filled, that costs them money. And if they have that bad review, that makes it, it's harder for them to actually compete in that space. So it's interesting to hear, like, have you found, and we've got 2 more questions here, but have you found that the pull for your solution has changed over, like, let's say just even the last 3 years, like from 2021 to 2025 or 4, that the priorities of your buyers have changed, the appreciation for what you solve has changed?
Yeah, I'll give you a very good example. I'm going to do it with private equity companies, like venture companies.
There
Actually.
you go.
And in 2018, I was exploring potentially raising money. So those who don't know, we've always bootstrapped a company. We haven't raised any capital, which is interesting because we're pretty large now. We're almost doing 20 million a year in revenue. But we never raised capital. I considered it in 2018 when I was like going from my one business to the new one.
Mhm.
And it's funny what happened. So I came in, I made like a deck, and the deck said, there's all these point solutions coming to, because I was living it. I mean, my first business was a point solution. So I was, imagine like you're in a war and you're on the front line. That was me. I'm on the front line. I'm seeing everything happen real time. I'm seeing like one building, they're doing like lobby events 10 times a month with different solutions trying to sell into the properties, all trying to get the residents to download their app.
Yeah, hug and chug.
It's crazy, like what I saw. So I came in and I'm going to make a business out of like creating like a one-stop shop. That was my goal. And I put that in my deck, and I talked to some big companies, like big ones that are in our space, like proptech specific firm. And you know what they told me? They're like, well, so I showed them like almost like a little chart of all the things that are point solutions. And I said, I'm going to roll these all up. And they said, well, we invested in this one. Another one, well, we invested in this one here. So we can't invest.
We've got a competitive. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, like every conversation I talked to somebody, they didn't understand that it was needed. They didn't understand what we were doing.
Or they had a conflict.
They thought that, they were thinking like someone needs help with X. We're going to invest in a company that does X. They didn't think about how that affects the landlord of having all these different X and Y's and Z's and ABCs in their tech stack. So I would say right around 2022, when like talks of centralization started happening and them realizing there's just too many solutions they're using, that's when it changed for us. Like we basically, all of a sudden, everything we were building the last few years, people were like, oh my God, we're looking for something exactly like this, like your platform. And they just realized that now that they actually need it. Because before they were kind of going after, our problem is X. Let's Google, X CRM or X service is. So that was the aha moment, I would say, when I actually saw people searching for platforms like ours and retention specific. When
became a top 3 KPI.
Yeah, and like now, like some of these private equity groups are like knocking at our door every single week. I'm getting emails. They're telling us how much they love our business model, all these great things. And it's funny because there's some of the same ones that told me no in 2018 now all of a sudden wanted they're interested. So it's pretty interesting how it kind of came full circle. But that's why I would say if you're an entrepreneur and you're boots on the ground, front line, and you're seeing something, you got to just believe in your vision. Don't think you're crazy. Just believe in your vision and execute it.
Well, and I think the thing that you did really well, that is, for the being part of the conversation, is that you went and talked to the people on the ground floor. You put yourself in an uncomfortable position and talk to people. And the one thing that gets overlooked by a lot of people is that you don't learn about the business until you sell. You've got to go, like your day should be, I need to find 100 no's. If I don't find those no's, no one never gets to 100 no's, but try and find no's, because if you're not trying to get just some sort of response, you're just like hobbying away.
Oh yeah. Agreed. 100%. You need to understand the end user, 100%. Like, I was a renter, so I always put myself in, like, whenever I meet with my product team, I'd always be like I'd be like, should we do it like this or like this? And I'm like, well, if I was the renter and I wanted to do this, like, I feel like it would work better like this. Or if I was a renter, I would use this service, but I probably wouldn't want this other service. It's just spammy. So that's where, it's nice that I was also a renter and then talking with the properties. The combination of both helped a lot.
We got one question from the audience. Take a look at that, and then we'll follow up with the one piece of advice.
Yeah. So Jason, great question. We do have some clients that have 32 or 3 unit buildings, and then they create like one community app for their portfolio, right? So it's not like each building has like their like luxury tower app, or because we white label, right? So you can have like your brand of your ownership group or management company as the kind of controlling brand in the app store. And then you can roll up all your, you have 20 unit buildings, it sounds like. Even if you had 3 unit buildings, you could roll them all up under one brand. So we have a few clients that do that. So you could do that. And you can have like resident perks program, groups, whatever you enable on the back end of our system, you could basically turn on and off.
It's scalable up, down, depends on how you want to present yourself.
Yeah. And we work with office buildings too. We have a lot of our residential like owners. We have some big ones. They also own office buildings. So, they came to us and said, hey, can you guys do the same resident app for a tenant app for our tenants? And we did. So there's a lot of similarities between office and residential as well.
Yep. Close it out. What's the one piece of advice you could give somebody who's trying to find those moments that equates to a buyer in the hell yes situation?
I would say don't give up. I think there was plenty of opportunities where, a reasonable person probably would have given up in my shoes. I would try to talk to as many end users as possible, and you're going to get no's, you're going to get ignored. People are not going to answer your emails. It's part of life. So don't give up, and just, the ones that do answer your emails, take full advantage of their time, thank them, give them a gift card, do something nice to get back, because someone volunteered their time. And I had plenty of people, I would say early on, that I will never forget those people. Like, they always helped me out as an outsider to the space. So I would say never give up. That's my number one piece of advice.
Awesome. Right on. Who should we talk to next? How can people get a hold of you?
Sorry, you broke up.
We got one more question here. Sorry. Mobile access property managers coming this year.
Yes. So Q2.
All right. Corey, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know, Corey, if you were you might have been on the call with my CPO, but I think, yes, Q2 is when it's scheduled. We already have parts of it. Yeah. I don't know if Corey's referring to something specific, but the specific thing that they want is coming Q2.
Cool. There you go. Who should we talk to next? Who in your network would be a valuable guest for the show? Help people learn.
I don't know. Let's see. I think Grady. You should talk to Grady Newman. He's a good guy.
Grady Newman.
He gets stuff done. He's a good person in multifamily to know, and I really like him, respect him, and I think a lot of clients that I referred his way are really happy with him as well. So let's get him on here.
Very cool. Awesome. How can people get a hold of you?
If you want to get a hold of me, you can just email me, Konrad with a K at elevateos.com.
Very cool. Thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate it. Konrad, super good advice. I think that the persistence is something that everyone should be taking away. You're going to get a lot of no's, like go for no's. You get yeses. Really appreciate kind of you sharing a little bit of your journey and how you guys got to where you're at. especially the change. And a lot of people have been selling prop tech for that as long as you have. And it's the world has changed in the last 3-4 years, right? In the last year and a half, really 2 years. So that's super insightful. Thanks everybody for listening in. We'll be on the podcast. Tune in for us on Apple or Spotify. Please give us a rating or a thumbs up or any sort of comments. That always helps us in the ranking. And if you are looking to talk about centralized maintenance or anything like that, reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. And appreciate everyone for listening. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Thanks, Konrad, for all your insights. Super insightful.
It was great being here.
Right.
Yeah, take care.
And we're done. There you go, man.